Welcome to another episode of the Office Altering Hiring and Empowering Solutions podcast. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. If you're a first-time listener, hopefully you will become a long-time listener. As always, I'm your show host, Molly McGrath, founder of Hiring and Empowering Solutions and creator of this revolutionary podcast. I'm so excited. We're just going to dive in about today's guest. We have attorney Ruby Bolton of Bolton Law Firm in the Woodlands, Texas, Houston, Texas area, and founder of BoltonLaw.com. Ruby is a family law and an estate planning attorney, and what a beautiful heart-centered niche practice that goes hand in hand. I just absolutely love that. And Ruby's going to, thank you, Ruby, for being with us today.
Oh, absolutely. I'm delighted to be here.
And I'm excited about your topic. I know you and I spoke before the holidays, and we had a pretty significant conversation about today's topic, which is guilt, the working attorney's dilemma. And as you and I talked, I've heard this from so many attorneys. And the first time I heard you speaking about this conversation and this topic was on Davina Frederick's amazing podcast that I've also been a guest on. She does such a beautiful job. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, on that podcast, what really struck a chord with me is when you spoke of how you're an attorney fighting for families day in and day out, whether they're going through divorce, estate planning, what have you, which is very much emotionally charged, both sides of the law, area of law, and how you're just absolutely fighting in court every single day. You're a phenomenal business owner. You very successful practice, but wrestling with this topic around guilt and how. And what I liked about on Davina's topic or podcast, you talked about the double standard impacting women in the workplace, the stories we often tell ourselves that hold us back, the guilt as parents, and many of our listeners are attorneys and or support staff. So whether you own a practice or you work in a practice, it really can resonate with whichever listener you are, and especially mothers often feel whether they're at home or they're at work, they're in this constant internal struggle and tug of war, right?
I know, absolutely. That was something that I experienced. I remember when I started my family, I used to have people that would tell me, oh, you are so lucky because you get to have everything. And I remember thinking, no, but no matter what I'm doing, I feel like I'm leaving something out. Something's always being neglected. And it was definitely a real adjustment and struggle for me because I did feel, when I was focusing on my practice, concern about, was I neglecting my children? Was I spending enough time with them? And then during the times that I was with my children, I thought about, my clients who are obviously going through very difficult times themselves. And it was very important to me that they were not neglected and that they were taken care of. So it was always a very difficult balancing act.
It's so interesting because I hear that, and I know you and I spoke and you were a little shocked to hear this, that many men go through this just as much as females go through this. And I hear this from male attorneys all the time as well, where they're feeling the guilt of being stuck in the conference room and missing their child's soccer game or baseball game or what have you, showing up late again, missing dinner, and they're feeling the pressure from their family as well. And it really is a widespread topic among business owners as well as employees.
Yeah, I was really interested when you told me that you heard that from men so much. So of course, obviously, I represent huge numbers of men. I've represented lots of men in custody battles. So I've got lots of experience in speaking with them about their parenting, about what makes them great dads, about why they're necessary and important in their children's lives. And I've got to admit that I had always thought that that sense of guilt when I was successful was something that was due to the fact that, my orientation was, I was raised to be a full-time mother. I was raised to be a stay-at-home mother. That was the presumption when I was growing up, was that I would be home with my children. So in this day and age where we do see fathers being a lot more involved, not always, but frequently, you see fathers that are very involved. I can see how that sense of being torn and that guilt would be something that would be reaching out to them as well. And I would imagine that in addition to those fathers that I spoke about that are really hands-on and deeply involved in their children, with their children, there are other dads who maybe have a more traditional, split of their time, who are sitting there saying, I know these other dads are coaching Little League and these other dads are, going to parent-teacher meetings, and I'm calling in not able to again. So I can see how that could be. But yeah, I had always kind of thought that was the mostly exclusive to women. So it was eye-opening.
It was at one point, and I'm seeing more in this day and age, even now that we daily get phone calls from attorneys across the country that call us about either whether they're ready to hang their shingle for the first time and or ready to, whether they're coming out of a law practice or big firm and starting to step out on their own and or making a transition from another area of law. And nothing warms my heart more than when I hear male attorneys especially call me and say, listen, I've been crushing it. I've made all the money that I need to do. And whether they're going through a transition such as a divorce or they may not be, and saying, I don't want to work this hard anymore. It's not about the money. It's about the work-life balance. It's about the quality of life. And truly, the guilt is just crushing me because I'm not home and I'm not present. And when I am home, I'm not present. My family's even commenting on it now. How I am just, you can see it in my eyes. I'm not present. I'm not there because I'm consistently worried about what's coming in my email, worried about my phone blowing up, worried about the documents that I have to get ready for tomorrow's meetings, what have you. And they're saying, I cannot sustain this. I don't want to sustain this. And something's got to give.
I think that a lot of times our preconditioned ideas that we're taught, where we have like the cats in the cradle, or you hear things like, no one on their deathbed ever said, I wish I had spent more time at the office. And there are all these stories that we tell each other as a society that are designed to say, hey, stop and spend time with your family. But the flip side of that I think we all kind of internalize is the idea that, hey, successful people aren't caring enough about their family. Successful people don't love their children enough. They're not as committed to their wife as they should be. And I think that what happens is as we reach a level of success that we had been conditioned to believe was always achieved at the expense of your personal relationships, people hold themselves back and they deliberately are less successful because they don't want to be the person that they perceived as not caring about their family.
I really want our support team, our staff, to listen to that and listen to that loud and clear, because so often I will hear from support team that as a firm is growing and they're at a point where you might have an opportunity to up level, to get a promotion, to take on new responsibilities, etc. And they'll say to me, I don't want to neglect my family. I'm afraid to take that on because I see how hard my attorney works. I see that they are stressed out, that they're not making it to the baseball game, what have you. I don't want that. So this conversation is so pivotal and revolutionary for both support teams. So don't zone out if you think this doesn't apply to you, and for the attorney, because we can redefine how we do business, how we run a small practice. To your point, Ruby, when people say this to me all the time, you're so lucky, you're not chained to a desk, you don't have to answer to the man, so to speak, you own your own business, etc. And I will say, come shadow me for one day. Yes, I feel very, very fortunate. But even this morning, getting ready for this podcast, getting my 17-year-old and my 15-year-old ready for school, still making them breakfast, make sure they're up, make sure they get out the door, etc. As I'm pulling away, coming into the office, they're still going through my head is a tremendous amount of definitely guilt, because my daughter's like, saying, oh, I forgot this, I forgot that. I'm like, I can't deal with this right now. So in that moment, I had to choose whether to empower her as a 15-year-old to do what she needed to do. And there's so many different things about her failure to plan wasn't my crisis, etc. But as a parent, you're still feeling that when you're pulling away. So the team members, I want the entrepreneur, the attorney to listen and think about the message that you're sending to your team as you grow this practice, especially if you have a revolving door and people leaving, et cetera. What tonality, what culture, what message you're sending to them if you are operating in this place of the chicken and the egg, so to speak, because so go you, so go your team. And you're showing them the way of how to run a business and how to have a work-life balance. And that's what I love about especially family law and estate planning is that for the most part, you're in full control of your calendar. For the most part, you can really design a business that you want that emulates that work-life balance. So team members, if you're listening to this, I want you to take this message back to your entrepreneur if they're not here, and listening to Ruby of how you really, and I'd love for Ruby for you to speak to us about this conversation, about this idea of delegation when growing your business and how to scale and how to do it right so you don't get stuck in this place of burnout and missing all your family events and feeling that guilt, whether you're at the office or home.
Oh, absolutely. I think that if you ask anybody who has got a successful practice, at what point in their career were they having to work the most hours, and at what point in their career were they under the most stress? It's not when they've got several attorneys under them, and it's not when they're pulling, seven figures. It's when they're working on their own and they're the janitor and they're the CEO person. They're the SEO person. They're the advertiser. They're answering their own telephones. The person who's trying to do everything alone is working more hours and taking a lot more of that stress home than somebody who has allowed themselves to grow and structured their firm with the intent of, I'm going to have a business. This isn't going to be just, a little office and, Mayberry, and I'm on my own with maybe one support person. I'm going to own a business, and that business happens to be a law firm. And how am I going to set it up and structure it?
And so how do you get to that place, that pivot place? I love what you said. It's usually not about the file, et cetera. It's when, and many people listening can resonate with answering the phone, being the SEO person, the CEO person, and being the attorney. And how do you do it the right way of breaking that cycle and finally deciding and declaring that the energetic cost, because people always negate that. They measure everything in time and money, and that's how they define success, by and large, money. But you cannot put a price on the energetic cost of guilt and stressed out and burned out and things of that nature, which people typically don't pay attention to until, I heard this quote recently: if you don't put time into your wellness, you are going to be forced to put time into your illness.
That's a good quote. So I will say that for me, the real turning point came when my children started to go to college. Because I wanted to be able to, I've got 5 children, and I wanted to be able to pay for their college education. And I had spent all their childhood thinking I prove that I love them by working as little as I can, and I prove that I love them by spending as much time as I can. And for the first time, I thought, I also prove I love them by paying for things that are important and make their life better and doing these things for them. So I think that there's really two parts to it. And the first is you've got to decide what it is that you want. And if what you need is to generate, income at a certain level, how are you going to do that? And if you're going to do that by running, let's say, a firm of 6 people, well, then you work backwards from that. If I want to have, gross income of, $2 million or whatever, how many people do I need to do that? How do I structure that? And once you figure out exactly what you're wanting, so you tend to hit what you're shooting for. So if your goal is, I just need to be able to pay my own bills, well, then guess what? That's where you're going to be. If you want more, your goal has to be for more. And once you've figured out, done the legwork of what does it take to reach where I want to be, then the next step is educating yourself. And there is so much material out there on how to run a business. My kids laugh at me. I'm a big believer in audiobooks, and I've got hundreds of them. And my son was driving across country with his cousin, and I gave him my login information for my Audible account so that he could look at it. And, he and his cousin were going through saying, "Oh my gosh, Mom, you have got so many books here on organization and success and delegation." And yeah, I do. I do. There's just so much material out there. There's wonderful, YouTube videos. There's the TED series are fabulous. There's books, podcasts like yours. There's coaching services. If you feel that once you've identified where it is you need to go, and then you do going backwards, what parts do I need for this machine? And then you figure out, well, what parts don't I have? What parts am I weakest at? And everybody kind of feels like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do any of it. Well, pick the most critical area. We're going to work on one at a time. Do you need to know how to balance your budget? And maybe profit first would be a great place to start. Do you need to know how to organize your time? Yeah, I liked getting things done. There's just so many resources out there. Once you pinpoint the areas that you think you need the most help in, and you start addressing them.
Wow. You just said, I think you just nailed the magic bullet of how to break free of guilt, the parent guilt, and the hokey-pokey of constantly having your head one foot in business, one foot in being a parent, and who comes first. And you said something so profound, Ruby. What I heard you say is decide what you want. So if your goal, and stop comparing yourself to others that you're seeing in the conference room, on social media, et cetera, that you need to build a $5 million business. And that's the definition of success. Find your definition of success. If it's to cover your overhead, then great. I mean, there are so many business owners that can't even do that. There are so many humans that can't even do that. That alone is a personal victory by and large. Or if it's to build a $2 million business, whatever it is, and then you break it down into, okay, what do I need from a matter of new cases to be able to accomplish that? How much time is my average case? And how much time am I going to have to build, put into the business for this. And then you go home and have a conversation with your family. What I love that you said, yes, a form of love is that I'm always there to help them, to feed them, to bathe them, to what have you. But there's also a form of love of being able to make sure that we have a roof over our head, that we can live the lifestyle that we want, that we can take the vacations we want, etc. And and I always say this, the truth will set you free. Having the crucial conversations will always, always set you free. But being in your head and beating yourself up and using it as a weapon will destroy you. And it's not helpful to anyone. So when you have a conversation with your family and say, listen, I'm going to pay for your college education. This is what my world's going to look like. I'm going to work late on Tuesday nights. And if you create a time template and then you enroll the people into and say, listen, this is what my world's going to look like. This is that when I'm going to be home, when I'm not going to be home, when I'm going to work late, when I'm not going to work late. And it's flexible as long as we communicate on what your needs are. How wonderful is that? How much did that set you free when you gave yourself permission and then you communicated with the people that you love in your life about that?
Oh, it was fabulous. I will tell you one thing that I realized too is children really take their cues from us. And I have always recognized that. That's something I've talked with my clients when they're going through a divorce. How do I do this? Well, they're watching you. If it's, you're showing them that you can't recover from this, they're learning they can't recover from this. Well, the guilt works the same way. If you're feeling enormously guilty and every time you talk to your children, you're apologizing because you don't feel like you're there, well, that's what they're learning. Mom doesn't spend enough time with me, or dad doesn't spend enough time with me. They don't do enough with me. They should be doing more. And it makes it a lot worse. I realized that, at one point, I spend as much time with my children nearly as if I weren't working once they started school, and where most of my sense of guilt was coming from, was again, that expectation that, well, I should be home, and they were hearing it from me. So when they said to me, well, you are never here, and I started, well, yes, I am. Well, where are they hearing that I'm never there from? Well, they're hearing it from me, right? They're hearing it in, what I say and what I worry about. And I think that if we are okay with being successful, or we are okay with working, and we recognize that we're prioritizing our children, they feel a lot more secure than if they're constantly hearing from us, oh, I don't do enough, I'm not there, I'm not there, I'm not there. And I also think that a little of this, modern day idea, I found it really interesting when you were talking about, you were talking with your daughter and you were saying, do I handle this myself, or do I empower her to handle it for her? And I think that one of the ways that we react as a society to being told we don't do enough, that we're not there enough, is we end up actually holding our children back and trying to do for them as proof of love and being there, things that they really ought to be learning to do themselves. So yeah. I can tell you, actually last night or yesterday afternoon, I was working, and my 18-year-old daughter, she's a high school senior, and she called me. She was at an appointment out of town, and her car wouldn't turn over when she got back in. And I'm like, well, you weren't there long enough for the battery to go dead. It's probably, you got to jiggle the connection. And she's kind of, Mom, can't you just come out here? Well, that is what I ended up doing. And, it was just that the battery terminals needed to be cleaned. And I drove to the auto parts store and got a little kit and cleaned them and showed her. But I did sit down with her and say, honey, you're 18 years old, and everything I did, you should have been able to handle. And, maybe, although I don't mind, I want to be here for you, I want you to know how. And if you're in this situation and I'm not available, Maybe you call an Uber, go to an auto parts store, or look at YouTube, figure out how to address the problem.
Yeah, how great. And what I'm hearing, and listeners, if you are stuck in this quagmire of guilt, whether it's guilt, I hear often that I'm not working on my health, I'm not able to get my workouts in, what have you, whether it's about children being at home and being fully, wholly present when you are there, or being present when you're at work, or it might be in building relationships, spending time with your friends, whatever it might be. Guilt, what I'm taking from this, Ruby, is guilt is a choice at this point here after listening to this podcast, because when you get really clear on what's important to you and you identify it, working out, work, how much money you need to make, how much time you need to make, family. And it's all about planning and having the conversations with the people. To your point with your 18-year-old daughter, here are many resources that you can have if and when you get stuck in a situation where I can't get you. There's Uber, there's AAA, there's what have you. And as I said earlier, a common statement in my home is, your failure to plan is not my crisis. I will always be here for you, but you'll have to take some ownership and taking stock of what your needs are, especially when you have teenage and close to adult children as well. It's just fascinating. That was a pivotal point for me when I finally got clear that, and actually it was after I got shingles, because I was completely stressed out. I was running 2 businesses and my children were much younger then. It was about 5 years ago. And I was going through a divorce. So I was a single parent. And I was at the point where I just wasn't listening. I was just white knuckling. I was plowing through, and guilt got the best of me. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And it wasn't to that point. There's always that statement, behind every breakdown is a breakthrough, but I was forced to look at it. And you don't have to get to that point. This podcast, hopefully you're going to take some great information, whether you're a team member or an entrepreneur, to be able to implement into your business, that it's so critical and crucial when you do have those conversations and you let your team know, you let your children know, you're very clear, you give yourself permission to work late one night a week and you have no guilt about it. That's what really set me free, if you will. My kids know that I work late every Tuesday night. Like, don't even call me. Actually, if the house is on fire, call the fire department and they'll help you. It's to that point where I say, I need this sacred time to be able to be fully present, to work on all the projects I need to work on late Tuesday nights, because then when I get home, I am there. I am present.
And I think that's so important. That is definitely something that I learned. It's so easy, in this day and age, we've all got, our cell phones that have our emails on them. And most of us get, messages and voicemails even from the office, or some people have their office phones on their cell phones. And if we allow our work to do it, it will completely bleed over and obliterate any personal time. I find it very important to block out, this is when I'm working and this is when I'm not. So I know there are people that successfully work from home with their family there. I could never do that. I could work from home when my family was asleep or at school, but I find it I focus so much better sitting at my desk in my office. And when I'm at home, I don't want to be thinking about work. I want to be thinking about my family.
Yeah, that was a big turning point for me when I worked from home. I worked from home for 15 years, and then I got an office 2 years ago, and it has been a game changer for me, to the point where now I don't even give myself permission to bring my computer home. I actually have a sticky note that says, your family depends on you leaving this here. To remind me, because I'll say, well, I'll work when the kids go to bed, or I'll do this. And I need that time for rest and rejuvenation and reading and podcast. I love your comment about the podcast. I just got back we drove cross country from Buffalo, New York, where I am, to Colorado, made a 2.5 week road trip out of it. And it's my kids. They know I got podcasts, I got audiobooks, what have you, and they complain about it. But it's interesting because halfway through this book that I was listening to, the author was speaking about how about how to embrace failure and how he had lost everything after building a $5 million business and then rebuilt it. It's actually the author of Dilbert, the comic strip. And when my son started hearing the numbers and started hearing about it, he's like, wait, can you rewind that chapter again? And he's like, then I have him completely enrolled in the book. And so when you do enroll your children, your family into what you're building and how they are a strategic byproduct of that, it's just fascinating how the guilt goes away. And not only that, but you get to bring your family. You don't compartmentalize your life. You actually get to bring your family into. So often I'll hear people say, I don't even think my wife knows exactly what I do. I don't think my kids know what I do. And for me, when my kids started understanding what I do, the appreciation and the gratitude that they had really had for what and do have for what I do made me feel so much more determined and proud and present when I was at work for them.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, one of the things that has been really exciting for me is my 24-year-old daughter is, she's launched a photography business, and just having conversations with her, and she'll tell me, well, I see, what you did and how do I do this, and just applying my business to hers. And, then my younger daughter said, well, I want to be a YouTuber, and I wouldn't have thought I would, but then I see Savannah, who's my older daughter, and she's doing so well with her photography. Why shouldn't I do this? And entrepreneurship and success is something your children can learn too.
Yes. Wow. So can you give us, what would you say is the one personal trait, and maybe that one professional trait you feel that you can integrate that will impact your success? And again, I love that you said, define your success. If it's covering overhead, fantastic. Like, celebrate that and embrace it, and don't compare yourself to others. Or if it's to build a $2 million business or practice, what would you say are the traits that will impact your success more than ever and set you free from this emotional bondage of guilt, shame, whatever it might be?
I think that on a personal level, you need to analyze where the guilt is coming from. Is it really coming from actual neglect, or is it coming from preconceived ideas that you have that might not be accurate? I really feel like a lot of the guilt that I felt was not based at all on actual failures. It was based entirely on the fact that my life was different than I had expected it to be. And that's not really something to feel guilty about. Everybody's life is going to be different from how you expect it to be. So I think that we need to look at what our ideas are of success that's driving that guilt. On a professional level, I think, if there's one trait to success, it's really stopping and analyzing what's not working and why. It's like the difference between someone who says, well, you know what, my computer's not working, I better call somebody, or somebody who's going to say, well, let me try this. Hey, maybe I'll try this. And you do that with your business. If it's not working, what specifically isn't working? And what can you do to address that specific point? You don't have to address everything at once. Address what is stopping you.
Wow. That is a formula for success right there. So, number one, identify the root cause of the guilt. Because when you really get still with that and you get present with it, to your point, it's not necessarily what you think it is, that I'm not home for my kids. It's no, my life, and you know this in family law, my life is not how I thought it was going to be, that we're going to be married forever, celebrating 50 years. It's not. I'm a divorced parent right now, and I'm running a business or whatever it might be. Just get real, just get present, and just acknowledge it and identify it. And then from there, you can move into, okay, well, this is my current reality. So what's not working? And being able to identify that and then figuring out how you can shift it into what is working.
Absolutely. I think that we are capable of amazing things as we just need to, set those goals to reach them and then figure out how to get there. We need to be strategic and goal-oriented about how we achieve our dreams. They're not going to happen on their own.
And really clear about them. I'm a big fan of putting quotes and sticky notes everywhere around me to remind me. And what I'm taking away from this podcast, Ruby, is guilt is a choice at this point. After listening to you, I have had a massive shift in regards to, and hopefully our listeners, when you find yourself feeling that energetic fire coming up and you're feeling torn, you're feeling like you're in the hokey-pokey, you can't satisfy anyone, you're just spread so thin, the root cause is by and large guilt, number one, and number two, just be really clear that it's an active choice, because some of these phenomenal tips that you've given us, these tools that you've provided for us today, you can anchor to them and just get really clear on the root cause of it, what's not working, how you can move it into working, and then going back and figuring out what you do need for you to find that emotional and financial freedom, whatever it is for you, and then going back and having a clear conversation with the people in your life.
Absolutely. And, chances are you're doing a better job than you think you are.
I love that. All right. Well, I think that's a great stopping point for us today. Thanks again, Ruby of Bolton Law, for making an appearance as a guest today. And if you can tell everyone how they can find out more about you and your law firm, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I am on the web, of course, at boltonlaw.com is my website. On Facebook, you can find me at Facebook /Ask a Texas Attorney. I also have a YouTube channel, which is Ask a Texas Attorney as well. And you're welcome to call my office if you're in my area and you need help with a family law case. I'm board certified in family law. And my firm does an excellent job, and we'd be happy to help you out. Phone number is 281-351-7897.
Great. And you can find that at boltonlaw.com. We'll also have a link in the show notes. So thank you, Ruby, for being our guest today and sharing your extraordinary wisdom.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Well, finally, thanks to all of our listeners out there, and you can find us at hiringandempowering.com.